I'm Cassidy Gorman, and today I'm going to be talking about mental imagery and language comprehension across development. I will be answering the question of how does mental imagery influence language comprehension across age groups, and how do individual differences shape reading, memory, and spatial understanding. So first, what is language? According to Robert Owens, language is a socially shared code or conventional system for representing concepts through the use of arbitrary symbols and rule-governed combination of those symbols. We use language to communicate, think, and build shared meaning. We also use language for comprehension and production of words, sentences, and communication. Language consists of more than speaking and reading words. Language can be nonverbal, such as sign language. When language is used in oral or written form, we must have background knowledge to use it. Experiences are necessary for our language use. They allow us to visualize and give context to the language we are reading or hearing. Being able to visualize the language being used enables deeper understanding and comprehension. Language also draws on cognitive resources to create meaning and understanding of information. The information processing model talked about by Robert Owens talks about how whenever we hear language, we discriminate it along some form, and then we can organize that language. So we might organize it by animal or things that we see at the store or silverware. And then we also store that language for later use. And then whenever we hear or encounter those concepts again, we draw on our memory, which is the fourth part of the information processing model, to give us background knowledge and experience on what we're hearing. So what is mental imagery? Mental imagery is the mind's ability to create pictures, scenes, or spatial layouts without actually seeing them. Mental imagery is generally talked about in the context of memory or creativity. But today we're talking about it in the sense of language use. We use mental imagery whenever we are hearing or reading language to help us expand upon what we're reading or hearing. It helps us to be able to visualize what it is, the language that's coming in. And then Mast and Koslin theorized that mental imagery uses many of the same cognitive resources as visual perception. So whenever we're mentally using our imagination to create pictures or images in our heads, it uses many of the same cognitive resources that visual perception does, such as seeing something, making sense of it, and filing it in our head. So whenever we are using that mental imagery, it helps us with our understanding of what is being heard or read. Dennis states that imagery helps spatial or relational representations of information, especially when problem solving and interpreting or comprehending. So what that means is that whenever we are hearing that something is on something, we can imagine that a cup is on a table. If that's what we heard, we can visualize that in our head. Glenberg argues that mental imagery reflects our interactions with the world. So mental imagery is going to reflect the experiences that we've had. Whenever we hear language or read about it, we're going to draw on our own experiences. Mental imagery can be used as a learning strategy to deepen comprehension and memory by creating mental images to represent or connect with the concept or object being learned. Mental imagery plays a very important role in understanding language. Why does mental imagery matter for language? Pavio states in his dual coding theory that the use of verbal information with mental imagery enhances recall, either of events or while learning. So whenever you're learning about something, it helps to be able to visualize whatever you're learning about or hearing about or reading about in your head for deeper understanding, and then later on for better recall. When we read or hear information, especially descriptions involving space and motion, we visualize what is being described. So we visualize when actions are being described, and we also visualize whenever objects are being described. This allows for meaningful representations of oral and written information. Mental imagery also helps children and adults better understand what they read, remember information, and make inferences. Glenberg suggests that imagery allows for abstract language to be realized through real experiences, connection with real experiences and real-world representations. So what that means is that whenever we hear something that we're not really able to understand or comprehend right away, we can use mental imagery to kind of help us work through that and gain a better understanding. Research on adult mental imagery use reveals that imagery enhances memory and comprehension in a wide range of tasks, such as spatial information and location, mental scanning and rotation tasks, and memory and recall. Comprehension is necessary for us to be able to understand what we are reading or what is being said. Mental rotation tasks allow us to mentally turn or rotate objects to be able to see the whole picture in our minds. Mental imagery enables adults to visualize what is being described. They draw on what they have already perceptually gleaned from the world to be able to create that mental imagery. The work of Dennis, Cocude, and Mellett demonstrated that adults use mental imagery to encode spatial information and maintain internal models of locations or routes. According to Mast and Kostlin, mental rotations and mental scanning tasks show perceptual processes that we use daily. This means that the adults mentally depict descriptions similarly to how they perceptually perceive the world. Presley also found that mental imagery used in adults while hearing a passage resulted in greater recall of the content than those who did not. Child imagery research shows that development of imagery skills begins early on, but their imagery abilities improve as they get older. The more that they use their mental imagery skills and the more they are required to use their mental imagery skills, the better they will get at using them. As children age, cognitive and language skills increase in tandem. Children are able to use mental imagery to connect what they have perceived about the world. Children's brains become more organized as they get older, partly due to the information processing model mentioned earlier, and this allows them to draw on their organized information to create more efficient visual imagery. They can't do this as well when they're younger due to the lack of organization and experiences. Pavio discussed research where grade 5 students were asked about their thoughts at various points during the reading of passages from textbooks and obtained indicators of imagery on over 60% of the trials. Presley demonstrated in his research that the use of imagery instruction or descriptive language while teaching improves child reading comprehension and memory afterwards, specifically in educational environments. So, what are the individual differences in mental imagery? Children may require speech therapy services due to the lack of mental imagery abilities. In speech therapy, we can give more experiences and give more background knowledge to be able to help them create better mental imagery for better language use. Presley discussed that children in elementary school can demonstrate adequate decoding and vocabulary skills but perform poorly on reading tasks due to lack of integration of their knowledge with the text. With training, children can learn to use mental imagery skills to improve their language abilities. Blajenkova, Kozhevnikov, and Motes created an instrument to test individual differences in mental imagery, the Object Spatial Imagery Questionnaire. Their results found that people differ both in imagery type and strength. This includes object imagers and spatial imagers. Object imagers excel at vivid, detailed, and colorful mental pictures. Spatial imagers excel at mental transformations, navigation, and representing spatial layouts. These individual differences affect how language is processed from individual to individual. Some may be stronger in visualizing the details of the story, while others may be better at visualizing the setting of the story and the movements of the characters throughout the story. This can affect how people remember language, how people understand language, and how people communicate. There can also be weak imagers, meaning that their mental imagery skills aren't as strong as others, and this can also affect their language comprehension and production. Next, we will talk about imagery and reading comprehension. Mental imagery plays a direct role in reading comprehension, as the aforementioned research suggests. They can create mental models of characters, settings, and events. Imagery improves recall when asked comprehension questions. So if you are able to vividly create mental images in your head while reading, then you might be able to remember it better for later on comprehension and recall of that story. Spatial imagery allows readers to follow directions and track movements of characters, settings, and actions in stories. Presley argues for imagery instruction for early education to allow for better comprehension for children and then for adults as they grow older. Those with stronger imagery skills comprehend text and the details of text more efficiently. Reading comprehension is a skill worked on in speech therapy, and that can go hand in hand with working on mental imagery skills. Reading comprehension can also help with inferencing. If you've pictured the story in your mind while you have been listening to it or reading it, then you can better make inferences because you can visualize what is happening instead of having to remember just through language and not through mental images what is happening in that story. There are several gaps that remain in literature despite the rich amounts of research available, specifically on the types of imagers and learning strategies. So object versus spatial imagers, is one better than the other, or are there equal benefits in both? The development of imagery, so there needs to be more research, I feel, on how children acquire the ability and how it compares to adult abilities. Weak imagery, so those with weaker imagery skills and how they process language versus how those with high imagery skills process language. How mental imagery can be used in educational settings in general, and how does the rise in technology use affect mental imagery abilities, both in children and adults? That brings me to my proposed study. So the purpose of this study will examine how mental imagery abilities and subsequent memory and comprehension abilities are affected by the use of technology. The rationale for this study is that in this modern age, we require less use of visual imagery for object visual imagery through learning videos with depictions, finding or creating images with AI or Google, and then also through spatial imagery through visual or digital maps. This could also be related to the decline in memory abilities as efficient encoding through mental imagery isn't utilized. Readers' attention may be elsewhere due to technology, and the use of mental imagery isn't used to deepen understanding. Studies regarding mental imagery are older and didn't take place on many individuals living in the height of this technology age that we are in now. The study will explore whether technology hinders or enhances visual imagery and analyze the differences in delivery formats of information, use of visual imagery through brain scans, and outcomes of comprehension and recall. The hypothesis for this study is that if individuals exposed to technology media formats are compared with those exposed to media formats requiring increased use of mental imagery, then those in the technology-based formats group will show reduced use of mental imagery, comprehension, and memory abilities. Thank you.